So the exit polls are in for Bihar's 2025 election, and wow, they are painting a pretty stunning picture. We're talking about a predicted one-sided victory in what's famously one of India's most politically complicated states. So how on earth did this happen? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack right here.
Right, so that's the big question, isn't it? Bihar has this reputation, for just humbling pollsters and giving us these nail-biting, down-to-the-wire finishes. But this time, the polls are all screaming blowout. So what gives? What happened? How did one alliance manage to build such a massive lead?
And just look at this chart to see the sheer scale of what we're talking about. The aggregate of the exit polls puts the incumbent National Democratic Alliance, the NDA, at around 147 seats. I mean, that's just soaring past the 122 you need for majority. Meanwhile, the opposition Mahagathbandhan, or MGB, they're projected to be left way behind, with just 90 seats. Look, this isn't just a win, it's looking like a full-blown mandate.
Okay, to really get this, we've got to break down that winning formula. What were the key ingredients that made this landslide happen? Let's kick things off with the leadership. So the NDA basically ran on what you could call a two-engine machine. It was pretty brilliant, actually. At the national level, you've got Prime Minister Modi's incredible charisma and his whole narrative of a rising India. And then, right there at the state level, you had Chief Minister Nitish Kumar's long-standing reputation for just solid governance and stability. This mix of Delhi's star power and Patna's pragmatism turned out to be incredibly powerful.
But, beyond the leaders, the real genius here is the math. The NDA painstakingly stitched together what's basically a rainbow coalition of castes. They held on to their core upper caste vote, locked down the Dalit vote through their allies, and, this is the crucial part, they kept their deep support among the extremely backward classes, or EBCs, and the non-Yadav OBCs. I mean, that group alone is a massive 30% of the voters. What they built was this cross-caste pyramid that the opposition simply had no answer for.
But even with all that, there was another factor, maybe the most decisive one of all, the one that really turned a solid victory into a potential landslide. We're talking about what's been called Nitish Kumar's secret constituency for years, the women of Bihar. And this one number, it says everything. A staggering 67% voter turnout. That is the highest in the state's history. And pretty much every analyst agrees that this incredible surge was powered by women voters. They become the definitive swing vote in Bihar. So the question is, what brought them out in such massive, unprecedented numbers? Well, it wasn't just one thing. This has been building for nearly 2 decades, a result of really targeted policies. You've got the famous Cycle Yojana that literally put girls on bicycles to get to school, the huge Jivika network of women's self-help groups, and yeah, the controversial but very popular liquor ban. And then, more recently, you had the Lakhpati Didis initiative and a huge direct cash transfer, 10,000 rupees to 1.4 crore women. That really sealed the deal. And this quote from our source material really just nails the mindset here. For this absolutely critical voting bloc, politics isn't some grand ideological debate. Nope. It's about the tangible stuff, the day-to-day things. It's about stability, feeling secure, and having a government that actually gets things done. All right, so that focus on real, tangible benefits brings us perfectly to the next pillar of the NDA's campaign. See, they didn't just run on social programs. They managed to frame the entire election around a story of economic development and transformation. And guess what? They had the numbers to back it up. In 2023-24, Bihar's economy grew at a blistering 9.2%, even outpacing the national average. I mean, think about it. The state that was once labeled as backward is now one of the fastest-growing economies in the entire country. But, and this is a huge but, here's the central paradox of Bihar's whole story. While the overall economic pie is getting bigger at this really impressive rate, the slice for the average person is still painfully small. Bihar still has the lowest per capita income in India. It's this strange story of huge macro growth that just hasn't fully trickled down to micro prosperity. Yet. So what's actually fueling this growth engine? Well, it's a mix of a few things. You've got massive government spending on infrastructure. We're talking roads, power, the works. Then there are those welfare schemes we just talked about. And here's a huge, often overlooked factor, a remittance economy. Migrant workers sending money home. It's over 1 lakh crore rupees a year. That's insane. On top of that, the services and manufacturing sectors are finally starting to pick up some real speed. Okay, so we've seen the winning side. But let's flip the coin and look at the counter-narrative, because every election has its winner, but this one also had a really high-profile loser. I'm talking about the master strategist himself, Prashant Kishor, who tried to turn his consulting magic into a real political movement.
And you have to remember who we're talking about here. This is the guy who's been credited with engineering huge victories for Narendra Modi, for Nitish Kumar, for a whole list of leaders across India. He was the kingmaker, the man with the golden touch. And he came back to his home state Bihar to build his own party, Suraaj, from scratch.
So what was the result of all that effort? The exit polls are projecting somewhere between 0 and 5 seats, a total wipeout. The gap between the buzz his campaign got on social media and what actually seems to have happened on the ground is just massive. So why? Why did the master strategist's huge gamble fail so badly? All right, so when you dig into it, a few key reasons pop up. First, a total ideological mismatch. He was offering this data-driven, technocratic approach in an age that's really dominated by faith and identity politics. Second, his movement didn't have a single charismatic face, in a state where politics is incredibly personal. He also just didn't have the ground-level party workers, that cadre structure you need. And finally, by trying to go it alone, he basically ticked off potential allies on both sides and ended up just splitting the anti-incumbency vote.
And this quote, this one really gets to the heart of the whole thing. Kishor's campaign was rational, it was analytical, it was, well, quiet. But in the grand, noisy theater of Indian politics, which so often marches to an emotional, cultural beat, that silence was seen as a lack of soul.
Okay, so when we put all of these pieces together, the leadership combo, the social math, the women's vote, the opposition stumbles, what does this verdict really mean for the future of Bihar?
The big takeaway here seems to be that voters chose a kind of familiar paradox. They want change, but through continuity. Look, they're not just voting for the status quo. They can see the tangible results of growth, the new roads, the power that actually stays on, and they want more of that. They've just made a bet that the same stable, familiar hands are the best ones to keep that going, instead of taking a huge risk on revolutionary promises or some untested experiment.
And all of this leaves us with one final big question. In a state that was once famous for political chaos and rebellion, have voters decided that slow, steady, predictable governance is now the most revolutionary idea of them all? It's a question that's probably going to define not just Bihar's next 5 years, but maybe the future of development politics across all of India.